What we found in Egypt is only the highlands of it. Another very fascinating aspect of this testimony is that the ancient Egyptian priests found multiple caches of books and documents, which they then spirited away to the Library of Alexandria in Egypt. And we are told that the burning of the Library of Alexandria was a false flag, and the only thing they really burned was the census records, and the Romans took all of the real books, all the ancient stuff cataloged by the Egyptians, and hid it away in where? The Vatican Library. I have another insider who was given a top secret clearance to go into the Vatican Library and do research, and he actually saw these books himself and said that many of them had bright colors. They'd have a bright blue leather cover or a bright red leather cover. A lot of them apparently had belt buckles over the book, and when you open them up, the pages are made of some kind of weird indestructible material, so they're still white. You can't tear them. In some cases, all the pages are like barcodes. In other cases, the writing is very pristine, and you actually see diagrams of spaceships, space stations, all sorts of really advanced technology that's being hidden away in the Vatican. It's all being kept from us, and it's researchers like Graham Hancock who are truly looking for the breadcrumbs and have never been given access to the really good stuff hidden away in the Vatican Library. But we get tantalizingly close to the center of the mystery, because in this episode we're talking about this super weapon of the Ark of the Covenant, the idea that it's still there, and these mysterious tunnels under the Giza Plateau. Of course, the pièce de résistance of the tunnels under the plateau is the infamous Hall of Records described by Edgar Cayce. The idea that was given in his readings that there are highly technological artifacts there that will give us the entire history of the people who came to Earth and colonized it, forming what we now call Atlantis. This is Disclosure with Graham Hancock, the 5th interview out of 6 that we've done, and I want you to enjoy this. Check it out. So you and I both have spoken on Ancient Aliens, and the typical interpretation on that show of the burning bush is, well, there must be a UFO up there and the light is shining through the bush. Is that what you believe?
No, that's not my take on that. I look at another aspect of the story, and this draws from the research that's been done by Professor Benny Shannon at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Benny Shannon is professor of psychology at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and it happens that he's a great expert on ayahuasca, that visionary brew of the Amazon. I've personally had about 55 or 60 sessions with ayahuasca. I know for sure that Benny has had more than 400 sessions with ayahuasca.
So he could be clinically insane like 500 times over.
But the thing is, he's absolutely sharp and a very rational man, you know, and you know, an important academic in his own right. But he's put his money where his mouth is, and he's not just studied it academically. He's gone out and drunk the brew, and he's interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people around the world who've drunk the brew. And he proposes a very interesting theory, which is that ayahuasca in the Amazon is a mixture of 2 plants. One of them contains DMT, and the other one, the ayahuasca vine itself, contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor.
Oh.
This is necessary because DMT cannot normally be accessed orally. There's an enzyme in the gut called monoamine oxidase, which switches off DMT. That's why normally you need to smoke it in order to get the effect. Well, the clever thing about the Amazonian brew is that the DMT is in the leaves of the Psychotria viridis plant, okay, and the ayahuasca vine contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which switches off that enzyme in the gut that allows the DMT to be absorbed orally. It's a very clever piece of ethnopharmacology. Well,
and could that have been done randomly? I mean,
I don't believe it could have been done randomly, and nor do shamans in the Amazon. They say that their ancestors were taught to do this by the spirits.
Right.
Now, what Benny Shannon's point is that there are plants in the Middle East, indeed in the Sinai Peninsula, which contain exactly the same ingredients as the ayahuasca brew. Syrian rue, contains the monoamine oxidase inhibitor, and a species of mimosa contains the DMT. And he suggested, wrote a detailed academic paper on this. He suggested that Moses may have been under the influence of an ayahuasca analog. Of course, he couldn't get those Amazonian plants, but he was using plants that were locally available, which produced the same effect. And that his experience at the burning bush was precisely like an ayahuasca vision. It's actually very interesting in the movie Noah, which has recently, we've seen in the last few months, where Noah actually drinks a dark brew. That is a reference to this research, I believe, that there was a brew available in the Middle East that would produce a deeply altered state of consciousness. And in those deeply altered states of consciousness, we do not always encounter benign entities. We sometimes encounter entities that don't mean well for us and that hoodwink us. And again, I come back to my theme in my novels, that demons are manipulating humankind. So that's my take on Moses at the burning bush. He's encountering what the Gnostics called the demiurge. He's encountering this negative spiritual entity, which is going to lead him down a negative path.
And this entity was able to use him as an intermediary to build a super weapon.
Use him as an intermediary to build a super weapon, gives him the blueprint of the Ark of the Covenant, which is set out in very great detail in the book of Exodus. This monstrous instrument, as I called it, this weapon, is built at the foot of Mount Sinai by a craftsman called Bezalel, who is working to a blueprint that Moses has received from the entity who he construes as God, and has created this weapon of destruction.
And let's go through some of the descriptions of what the Ark could do. What were some of the different things that were used? Like how badass was it?
Let's say that Steven Spielberg was right on the money in the imagery of the Ark of the Covenant that he gave us in the famous Raiders of the Lost Ark. There is nothing in that film that I can fault from a factual point of view.
Wow.
The Ark, as it is portrayed by Steven Spielberg, whether it's a radio for talking to God, as one of the phrases that Indiana Jones uses, whether it's the bolts of fire shooting out from it and striking people dead, everything that we see about the Ark, this powerful, powerful instrument, in that film is absolutely in line with the biblical accounts.
Including the idea that the Nazis went looking for it?
Yes, I would say that idea is quite correct. Of course, the Nazis were on the dark side. They were the ultimate creatures of the demiurge. They were the ultimate attempt to lead mankind, to mislead mankind into a dark and deadly path.
And if they could get this weapon, then World War II would have been no problem for them, ostensibly, right?
They were looking for anything, any weapon of power. But it's important to recognize that the Nazis were deeply into the occult. They were deeply into the dark side. And I would say, when I talk about spiritual forces at work, negative spiritual forces, when I talk about war god, misleading Cortez and Moctezuma to create the catastrophe of the Spanish conquest of Mexico. The catastrophe of Hitler is another example of that. Again and again throughout history, human beings have felt themselves to be in contact and guided and inspired by spiritual forces which have led them to do terrible, terrible things. And Hitler was one of those, and it makes absolute sense that he would have sought out the Ark of the Covenant.
Wouldn't it be interesting if the Ark of the Covenant was still around somewhere?
Well, of course, I think it is.
You do? Okay.
My book, The Sign and the Seal, traces the Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia, to the highlands of Ethiopia.
So you actually think that this ancient technology, this super weapon, actually still exists on Earth today?
I do, yeah. And I think that it's under the guardianship of a people who are, fortunately for all of us, keeping it out of modern history, keeping it away from the world. The very last thing we want is for the Ark of the Covenant to appear again. All three of the monotheistic faiths, the fundamentalist aspects of Islam, the fundamentalist aspects of Judaism, and the fundamentalist aspects of Christianity have prophecies concerning the return of the Ark of the Covenant.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And for the Ark of the Covenant to be reintroduced into the time bomb of Jerusalem and Israel today would be catastrophic. And level-headed people who belong to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that's the last thing that they want to see. And in fact, I remember years ago when I was tracing the Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia, I had a long, pretty much off-the-record chat with the Israeli ambassador at that time. And I said to the Israeli ambassador to Ethiopia, and I said to him, come on, you guys have got Mossad. I mean, if the Ark is there, why don't you just go grab it? And he looked me straight in the eyes. He said, you know, that's the very last thing that we would want to do. For the Ark to be reintroduced into Israel right now would be a catastrophe for the world. So very happy for it to stay here.
What is some tangible evidence that the Ark still exists? What do we know?
Well, for me, it was an extended piece of historical detective work, because I haven't seen it. The Ark is kept in a sanctuary chapel in the grounds of the oldest Christian place of worship in Africa, which is the Church of St. Mary of Zion, in the city of Axum. And the city of Axum is itself an armed camp.